Hello and welcome to How I Built Bits, where I give you a cool tool, tip, or trick to improve your process and win back your time in 10 minutes or less. Clock's ticking, so let's get started. Hey everybody, today I want to give you my super fiery hot take from like a month ago at this point. Thoughts and lessons from the Apple Vision Pro presentation at WWDC. Now, since I wrote this piece, which is also a blog post on my website, casabona.org, more information has come out about the Vision Pro, but I'm not even talking about the actual features. I want to talk about the philosophy behind Apple's approach to the Vision Pro. So let me start by saying that before the WWDC keynote, I wasn't even remotely excited about an Apple VR product. VR doesn't excite me. The Meta Quest doesn't excite me. And while I had Google Glass, I was one of the suckers who paid $1,500 for the pleasure of getting a pre-market alpha product. And I liked it. I could see the potential, but I didn't love it. I ended up selling it. Suffice to say, Apple blew me away with their approach to the Apple Vision Pro, and the early reviews don't disappoint. So let's look at this from a business technology creator approach. And these are my initial thoughts. Number one is Apple shows you that you can go cheap or you can go impressive. Apple is going very high end here. Meta announced a $500 version of the Quest mere days before WWDC. And part of the reason I wasn't excited for Apple's version of a VR thing is that I don't even remotely care about the Quest or the metaverse. But Apple decided to go high end, making the Vision Pro a full $3,000 more than the cheaper version of the Quest. And not everyone will be on board, but there's no denying that Apple's product is impressive in such a way that Meta is getting dragged on Twitter hard. I will link to some examples. Meta basically owned this space for the past 5 to 7 years, and Apple just kind of blew them up in an hour. The lesson is don't just race to the bottom. You can create a high-end service and charge a premium if you are impressive. Okay, so don't just invent something in a day and try to sell it. Spend some time thinking about the actual needs of your customers and your audience and create something that is so impressive they can't say no to it. Number two is they are reusing auxiliary technology created in VR for other apps. Earlier in the keynote, they showed an iPad feature where they tell you if you're holding your screen too close. I can't help but think that this was tech they developed for eye tracking on the Vision Pro that made its way into other parts of Apple's ecosystem. The lesson here is use your sawdust. When you create, look at each part of your process and see how you can use and reuse it. I've done this with my automations for guest onboarding and the like. I've taken bits of my process and I've either sold them as products themselves or I've added them to other parts of my business. Number three, they are smartly taking familiar experiences and moving them to a new medium first. One of the problems with the Meta Quest that Sarah Dietschy points out is the interface and experience is unintuitive because it's unfamiliar. This was a lesson that I learned from Jared Spool over 10 years ago at an event apart. He talked about how Amazon incrementally redesigns their website so that people kept the familiarity because if people stopped buying, they would lose billions. Compare that with American Airlines, who completely redesigned their website from the ground up, and people hated it because they suddenly went from knowing how to use the website to not knowing how to use the website. Apple learned this lesson and took several things into account when they designed the UX for the Vision Pro. Those things are, one, we know how to use our eyes and our hands. 2, we know how to use the apps that they demonstrated. And 3, the ideas behind the UX are familiar. Make a call, send a text, browse a website. All of these combined means everything comes very naturally to us. Again, compare this with being in the metaverse, which is a whole other world, and you need to hold these hand trackers, and it feels very unintuitive. So the lesson here is lower your learning curve, lower your barrier to entry, and you'll create better, happier experiences for your customers. And finally, number 4, they are never first to market, but they are much better when they enter. There is a reason that post-1997 Apple is never the first to market on a product. It's because they do a ton of real-world research. They do a ton of research on how people will actually use the product. During the presentation, they used the term cheek width to point out that they've studied faces. And just saying that term makes my skin crawl, but that's besides the point. With the iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, and AirPods, they took care to truly understand how people use the current crop of products and improve upon them. The VR AR space is so controversial already. Even though it's been around for 10 plus years, there's still a lot of mainstream pushback. Creating a whole other world is weird, it's uncanny valley, it's dystopian nonsense to a lot of people. But Apple focused on how their product augments your current experience. You can still see your environment. You can still see real people in the real space. And they can see your eyes. The lesson is there's a lot of weight on being first to market so you can make a name for yourself, but you could just be better. If you impress, reuse the lessons that you've learned, and create better experiences, you can blow up the competition as well.